Hey, welcome back to the DC Shoot Off podcast for episode 6. Today we're talking lighting, continuous versus flash. I'm Sam Morse. I've got my co-host Tyler Prince.
How's it going?
And today we've got our special guest Ben Sant, a good friend of mine.
Tally ho.
So yeah, we're going to be talking continuous lighting versus flash, what's better, and really kind of discussing which one is better in which setting and situation. But don't forget, it's all play. Okay, that's the intro.
I'm like, is there going to be intro music?
There's intro music.
You'll cue the music.
I'll edit it in. Yeah, and the whole it's all plays. Huh?
You should just do it all live. You just switch it live.
I've thought about it.
That's editing.
Nah. Well, more stress. So, of course, we need to start off by talking about the upcoming DC Video Shoot-Off, August 22nd through 25th. You can go to dcvideoshootoff.org or the main website, shootoff.org, to find out more information, sign up. There's also a room block at the hotel. So if you want to stay at the hotel that's at the Arlington Courthouse, Hilton Garden Inn. And so go there, sign up. We're going to have a great list of speakers, sponsors, etc. It's a lot of fun. So today we're talking lighting. When I was, we at my main job, we have a lot of active duty airmen, and we don't just do video production. We try to help them brush up on their photo skills, and oftentimes we'll have them do portraits or stories or other things to stay fresh and such. I'll never forget one time, though, that they were doing a portrait in our warehouse, just kind of a environmental portrait type of thing. And they were setting up a whole bunch of video production lights, like an Aperture 300D and other things. And they had turned off the overhead lights so that they didn't get that nasty fluorescent light overhead, which I applaud them thinking through that. But at the same time, we share that warehouse space. So by turning off the overhead lights on our end, it actually turned off the overhead lights for our neighbors as well. And they don't particularly like it when we do that because they don't have video production lights on when we do that. So I was talking to them like, yeah, you could probably use flash for this, and then you can just leave the overhead lights on. You can freeze your action a little bit better, and you can get exactly the photo you're looking for, only with less setup time and not bothering our nice neighbors on the other side of the warehouse. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about that kind of difference of flashes versus continuous light, when each is actually better than the other, and kind of demystify it a little bit. So I want to introduce our guest, Ben Sant. He is a fantastic portrait photographer, but he also does video production, so he knows the video production side of things. He's used both continuous lights and flashes. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Ben?
Yeah, Ben, in the industry, so to speak, in part-time or full-time nature now for close to 20 years. Retired as a firefighter and paramedic, and like many of us, we always have side gigs and hustles we want to do, and this was something I kind of fell in love with, as always being an artist, and started actually more in the video and motion picture side of things, doing a lot of gaffer, grip work, DP work, PA work, and slowly moved my way into where I was finding a little bit more. And as I went through the journey, I started figuring out that I really love still photography and being able to convey thoughts, emotion, and motion, as a matter of fact, through lighting. And it was very quickly that I realized that off-camera lighting through the means of strobe or flash had a lot more power to add to my toolbox when compared to just using continuous lighting or natural lighting.
Yeah, and of course, when you say PA, you're not saying public affairs. You're talking production assistant.
Production assistant, yeah, not the Air Force. Yeah. Basically, I'm
not
the
public affairs, not physician assistant.
Yeah,
I paid $120 for 12 hours of work, and
18 hours. 18-hour days at $10 an hour, like handing out waters and yelling at people to be quiet. So yeah,
right. Yeah. So you brought up power, and that's the thing I want to really start off with. So I did a couple of quick tests before we started recording here to kind of show the difference between even a small flash and a big production light. And so this was a photo that I had. I shot it with my Aperture 120D. So it's a 120. Actually, I think it's a little bit higher than that, like 150 watt white light, 5500 Kelvin temperature. And so it got a good exposure, f1.2 on my 50 millimeter, 1/250th of a second. I think it was ISO 100. So, nice baseline exposure. And I was able to get basically the same photo. Granted, this is a little bit cooler because flashes are a proper like 5600 Kelvin. But I was pretty much just as bright with my Godox V1S flash at 1/64th power. I probably could have brightened this up a little bit, but still, I mean, 1/64th of its full power. Now going to full power, it is bright. It's bright.
Yeah. Don't go toward the light, Carol Ann. Yeah.
I don't want to distract us too much, but I have a quick sidebar for you, Sam.
Okay.
If I picked any photo of yours, could you tell me the settings from memory of how you shot that photo? Or is that just...
I mean, I just shot it and wanted to use 1/250th of a second because that's the sync speed for that camera.
I honestly can a lot of the time.
Yeah. I was going to say,
so I feel like there's a drinking game in here that we should all play at some time. But...
Instead of movie lines and movie quotes, identify the light used, the modifier used.
What was your
camera settings?
What was your shutter speed on this photo? No, drink.
Right. You better patent that and get that made into a card game quickly.
And by the way, those were using the exact same softbox, same distance from me, same camera settings. So I tried to kind of, minimize the variables as much as humanly possible and get a good comparison between them. But especially if you're trying to shoot out in broad daylight or, some sort of competing light, you're going to get a lot more punch out of a flash than you will from a continuous light. And to give you an idea, that is the light head for my 120D. And if you want to run that off of batteries, you're talking about like a $400 V-mount battery that's going to last you maybe an hour and a half at 100% power.
Yeah, and just to confirm, with your example photos, you had that constant light at 100%, right?
Yeah, the constant light was 100%. And then you got this little V1S flash on a Bowens mount adapter. And this is just an on-camera dedicated flash, very similar to a Nikon SB5000, SB900 that you might see. It's just Godox brand. And yeah, I was getting the same exposure at 1/64th power. And full power was just completely blowing it out. And this flash is, I think, $200 with like a $25-$35 Bowens mount adapter. The 120D, trying to run that all day, you're going to need a stack of V mounts, and you're talking thousands of dollars worth of V mounts, or you're sending somebody running to charge V mounts constantly, and you're still talking probably $1,000 worth of V mounts to run all day. Whereas a V1S, that little battery that it comes with can last you several hours of shooting easily. And if you need to shoot all day, I mean, maybe 2 more batteries. I don't know how much the Godox batteries are, but they're not thousands.
No, for one of their top of the line pro strobes that are 600 plus watts, I'd say a battery's a couple $100 for a new one. And I can last all day on those. Like I rarely have to, and I can even be out at full power in the middle of the sun and still be able to overpower the sun, where I know trying to overpower the sun with a constant light, I'm gonna have, not only gonna have to have a lot of power, but I'm gonna have to have one big light in a lot.
It's not gonna be it's not gonna be very comfortable for your subject either.
No,
even HSIs don't do that great when you're competing against the sun. Like
HMIs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. HSI is the color accuracy.
Look, man, I shoot video. Not an expert on acronyms and shit like that.
Yeah. So
but yeah, super bright lights
yeah.
also struggle against the sun. Is my point.
Yeah, HMIs are the big lights that you normally see in big Hollywood movie productions and stuff. We've got some at the squadron, and our M8s are like a solid stop brighter than the 300D, which is about a stop above the 120D. So I mean, realistically, that little V1S $200 flash is on par with, at the very least, an M18, if not an M40 HMI that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and you have to run a dedicated generator for it. So, I mean, you're going to get a ton more punch out of flashes.
Yeah, flash is one of those things that the bang for the buck, not only in price, but in power, easily as a pro, and usually will supersede any consistent light source that you're trying to utilize. It's portable, it's powerful, and because of the cost benefit comparison, it's definitely going to be a winner in most situations.
Yeah.
Of course. Once you really learn how to use it, there's all kinds of different techniques and effects and photos that you can create.
Mm-hmm. Certain things you can only do with
flash photography at all. I know there's a bunch of, like, you can freeze motion, you can get like a bunch of different, stops of motion in the same photo. I don't have any idea how to do that, but if I was going to go out and shoot photo, I'd be going to try and use flash. Because
yeah, and if you're dragging, there's a lot of techniques like dragging the shutter for a car photo, and using rear curtain sync so that the light streaks from the headlights and taillights lead into the car, and you can get some really cool effects in camera using a flash that you can't do with continuous light.
Well, and I think one of the other things, I know we're talking about power, but as we start moving into like the pros of flash photography, it allows you to shoot at shutter speeds that normally in a handheld situation you would have motion blur, because the flash is technically a second exposure, and that's probably one of the difficult things we'll talk about, is understanding with off-camera flash, you now have two exposures you're concerned about. Your light meter isn't going to tell you what that flash is going to do. But the cool thing is that I've gone down to like a 40th or a 10th of a second handheld on a non-stabilized body sensor or lens, and I'd be able to get crisp photos. Where if I was shooting natural light or with continuous lighting, there'd be no way to do that. I'd have to crank up my shutter speed, and if I'm trying to balance the exposure, that may include an increased ISO that I may not be comfortable with in a low light or a noise situation. And so that's just one of the benefits too, is like, man, I can really drag that shutter and get motion blurs or light streaks to depict the motion of the subject, but at the same time, I'm freezing what I want to be in focus and where I want the viewer's eye to go.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot for journalistic photography, where I would use a flash to just kind of sharpen up my foreground and then leave the shutter speed nice and long where I could get a lot of that background light happening. I forget if I saw this from somebody else. It's been so long ago that I can't remember where I learned this technique or if I just came up with it. But using a wide lens and then moving myself around my subject in a little bit of an arc mid shot, which would cause all of the outer edges to kind of blur and streak with a nice sharp foreground.
Yeah, I've even done, like, you'll do like a half second exposure or even a even a tenth of a second exposure. And if I have a zoom lens, I can actually rack zoom or crash zoom on that, and that causes cool effects too while freezing.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever point where the flash goes off, it's going to freeze. Everything else is going to drag and blur. So yeah, I know a lot of wedding photographers do that. I mean, you look at you could even just do a Google search for like wedding photography or dance photography. You'll see all sorts of like things that people have done with it. But yeah, the creative envelope definitely gets bigger for you. And I love how you talked about even in a journalistic aspect that can still be utilized, you know. So.
Well, and the fact that you're doing it in camera, you know, federal employees, military employees who are doing photography, a lot of times we're doing documentary type of work and you're not allowed to edit it, you know, so you're pretty much following the same rules as like the NPPA, National Press Photographers Association Code of Ethics, where you're not altering your image, you're not doing anything like that. But if you're doing a technique that is completely in camera and optical, that's fair game. So because that's being captured in camera, you're still representing what was happening on the location. Of course, I don't want to necessarily just bash continuous light.
No.
Continuous light absolutely has its place. I knew that we would be talking bad about continuous. I brought out the Aperture shirt. I don't actually represent Aperture or anything like that. I just got this at Cine Gear. But continuous light, I mean, first of all, if you're doing video production, you don't have a choice. You have to use continuous light. So if you're doing both, continuous light is going to give you light for both photo and video. So right off the bat, if you're doing video or if you're doing photo and video, you need some continuous lights regardless.
I like how you can blend them. And that's something where I think is something to point out is like, if you're doing video and photo, yeah, you need your continuous lighting set up, you know, if you're doing video at all. But if I add some flash to that as well, there's a lot of times where I will mix the two. So I may be lighting the subject or the key light, the brightest light in the exposure is going to be a strobe or a flash. But maybe I want to add something to the background, either some color or some fill. There'll be a lot of times I'll bring out my continuous lighting and use that as the fill. And so, and when we use flash, we actually do this normally. And that kind of goes into the two exposure thing, is where my light meter is actually controlling as I look through my camera and I see the light meter or my histogram or whatever I'm using to balance that exposure. That's actually weighing the ambient exposure. Now, the flash, on the other hand, is a second exposure that happens for that millisecond or time over duration where the actual flash pops. So I can literally like have two exposures where I can expose for the background and then I can light the subject to match, or I can turn the background dark, just like if I wanted to, you know, lower an exposure, taking a picture of a sunset, and then I can light that person in front of there so it looks almost more contrasty. So we call it exposure ratios, right? So I can make it look punchy or I can make it look more natural. And so there's two exposures there. So it gives you another tool for your toolbox where you can do it. And if you're a full-time flash photographer, you have to use the continuous lighting. Sometimes the sun will be my rim light on someone. I remember we came out to your day squadron, and we did a little bit of a workshop for your airmen and guys, and we quickly showed that I can put someone facing away from the sun's lighting the back of their head, and we can expose for that in camera with our light meter, and then I bring in a quick flash to expose their face and balance it out, and that would give me a far more dynamic and usable photo than it would if I was just trying to not have the sun melt the back of their head and have an underexposed face that now I have to try to go fix and post to try to get it usable and deliverable for the assignment.
Yeah, I remember at that same one, we also talked about light painting. And it lets you light paint with people by, you know, using the flash to freeze them in time, and then you can light paint around them without them just turning into a blurry mess.
Yeah, so gone are the days are like, hey, I'm going to light paint around you, hold still for the next 20 seconds. I can pop a quick flash to freeze them, and then I can grab my lightsaber or laser pen or whatever I'm using to light paint with. Yeah.
Nice. So there are certain situations where you want to omit flash completely. I've definitely found like I had some fun doing some series of portraits for my friends' cats. And we lured them into this little set with like a wreath and Christmas lights and stuff. And I'll have to put a couple of them up on screen and post. But we didn't want to use flash for that because it would scare the cats away. We had a difficult enough time. Of course, they like if we weren't trying to shoot, they were very curious about the set. But the moment we wanted to actually put them into a location that we decided, no, they were not having that.
Yeah, livestock's a big no. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that, Sam. I was out here in Utah. We have the Bonneville Salt Flats, and I was doing a collaborative group photo shoot. Think of beautiful models with big flowing dresses out on the salt flats on horses. I quickly found that some of the horses were not adept to having light, and I took a kick. And I can tell you from experience, well, here's what happened. I know my way enough around horses. I'm a good old boy from Utah here. I can understand pretty much the way things flow. Put your hand as you walk around the horse so it knows you're there, know how strong. And it didn't like the model's dress got hung up, and we were going bareback on the saddle. And anyway, what happened was it glanced off my shoulder and went down my camera, and it knocked the camera out of my hand. Even though I did have it on a strap, it actually ripped the quarter 20 thread out of the battery grip and shattered the trigger that I had on there for my flash. Oh, no. And I think what had caused that, and from what I understood from the subject, is that all the flashes going off throughout the afternoon were causing that horse to get a little bit agitated. And not only that, but we had like 40-mile-an-hour winds, so like your modifiers, Oof. And when we say modifiers, we mean like your soft boxes and umbrellas really weren't working. And so for the rest of that shoot, we actually had to go natural light the rest of the time. So there's simply going to be situations, whether it be subject oriented, where maybe the person has seizures. That's usually something I'll always ask nowadays. I'm shooting livestock, I'm shooting sensitive groups, sensitive populations, or I may just be in an environment where it's just not conducive. Right. And there's times where not even your consistent lighting is going to go up. I don't care how many sandbags you put on there, how safe you try to make the set. Things are going to happen and things are going to get blown over. If you're shooting around water where there's any type of electrical hazards, I do a lot of water work. I shoot models in water. I've shot all sorts of cool stuff where I've had to up the umbrella policy on my insurance before I go to that location, just because we have to be a little bit extra safe on there as well. And so livestock and sensitive groups, that's something to be considerate of when you go in with any type of flash lighting.
Oh yeah, and Air Force specifically, you run into the fun situation of if you're doing photos on the flight line anywhere near a fuels truck.
No,
I don't think I need to say how that can go badly.
Well, I did. I was an airport firefighter, man. I know how that is. I don't need an alert 2 for a refuel standby. And speaking of power, I'm using continuous lighting for this podcast, and the battery on my hair light just went out. So that shows you, like, let's
you pretty much have to be in mains power.
Yeah, and I'm not. I ran it on battery, so that's my fault. So I can't be Sam. Like, I tried to put the gobo up like him on the wall, and it's just not happening today. So, but Sam said my gobo looked good, so I'm going to take that as a
nice gobo.
As a nice gobo. It's great. It's a nice little cookie cutter on a snoot. So yeah,
nice. If you do want to see, this was something I was bringing up to some of the photo shoot off guys, seeing if they wanted to be part of this episode. And I think it was Brian Aho that brought up that sometimes you want to be able to see the color of the person's eyes, like really have them get the pinpoint pupils and really enhance that look. Continuous lights can be really good for that. Because you're blasting them right in the eyes with light. Of course, the flip side to that is if you're trying to overpower the sun, they're going to be squinting pretty hard.
Yeah, and what's really cool, like most flashes will have a modeling light, your higher end ones. So your little off-cam flashes like your SB 500, your 80-200 Pros, the one, and I have some demos here. But anything that we call them speed lights in the industry, right? And whether a lot of those in the Air Force are on Nikon, from what I understand. And I'm holding up one right now. So anything like this, even though this would have a modeling light, it really doesn't work well. But any of your bigger lights that you have, and you probably hear, I just turned it on, you hear the capacitor charging, but they do have a little modeling light you can turn on to kind of see what it looks like as a continuous light. So that's kind of one of the challenges, is like whenever I point a flash at someone, I can't see what it's going to look like till I actually fire it and look at the back of my camera to see what happened. Well, with your bigger lights, you actually do have a continuous light mode on them. They usually have a little LED chip, a chip on board or something like that you can turn on. So then I can get a little bit more of that preview like I would with my continuous lighting. And in fact, with some of them, I'll even use them as a continuous light when I'm trying to budget, the balance of, we have continuous lighting and we have strobe lighting. I don't want to haul all of it out onto a production. Maybe it's a last minute of assignment. Someone's getting a promotion. I need to go grab a quick shot of someone in a quick video. This is a time where I could just take the strobe and actually use the modeling light as a continuous light source to get that little video snippet that I need. So they're out there, but yeah, and going back to your point, a lot of times I'll use that modeling light to shrink or contract that pupil so I get the color of those irises. But
I just pop the flash a bunch of times. That'll do the trick too.
Yeah, as long as it's not the horse or the cat or the livestock.
Yeah.
And they do burst modes on these, where sometimes I'll even shoot a burst portrait where it'll shoot a bunch of pre-flashes on there to kind of sink that down. If I'm shooting indoors, maybe I'm shooting a graduation, a commendation, or something like that, a promotion, a headshot of someone. Like when we're indoors, obviously the pupils are gonna dilate, right, and we're gonna lose a lot of that color. So sometimes I'll pop some of those pre-flashes before we go, just to do it. But yeah, as you said, continuous lighting is gonna win in that advantage every time, because it's constantly hitting that iris, hitting that pupil, and it's gonna keep it nice and contracted and have a lot of burst of color in the iris.
Yeah, and on the flash side, one of the things we kind of touched on it a little bit already, but freezing motion can go even beyond just people and things like that. The effective shutter speed of a flash, especially when you dial down the power, is extremely fast. We're talking way faster than even some of the newer cameras that can shoot like 1/16,000th of a second and things like that. We're talking in the hundreds of thousandths of a second.
Yeah.
And only when it's dialed down in power. When it's full power, usually it's a pretty slow flash. But my understanding is a lot of times when you see photos of like a bullet going through an apple or something like that, kind of that classic shot, they're actually using a motion trigger and using a flash to expose, just leaving the shutter open in a dark space.
Yeah, that's very true. And so with your high speed stuff, you'll see the actual formula used. It's called TNS, so time and duration. And without going too mathematical, there's no point to go that far. These things are literally tied to a diode or an electrical switch that'll do that. And so it's really cool what you can do. So when you see high speed, like a lot of these high speed videos, like shot with phantoms and stuff like that, a lot of times when they can't really get a bunch of HMIs on set and they don't have 3-phase power and generators the size of Volkswagens out there, a lot of times they will use flashes for video to capture that stuff, and those things can burst and recharge much faster than any continuous lighting. And so the ability to freeze motion is impeccable. And I can say, as a person that shoots, as a photographer that photographs people mainly, it has saved my bacon so many times when, I'm shooting, and I shoot on older cameras a lot of the time. I don't have a lot of the newer. In fact, I just moved into my first mirrorless here in 2024. And luckily, you guys out there listening to this, you have access to some of the greatest equipment out there, in your squadrons and in your crews and in your teams. But there's going to be times where you're not necessarily going to have that, and flash can save you.
Absolutely.
You're not going to be able to shoot a 1/500th of a second. I don't want to have to deal with 64,000 ISO, and I know that's an extreme, but it's one of those things where it can do it. And if you would allow me, I can show you an example real quick of exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, let's go back to the horse shoot. The infamous, and I'm still recovering from this, by the way. It hurt pretty bad. I've been down for a couple minutes. And so you can see on the screen, I just have a Lightroom photo. Okay, the wind was blowing. We're out on the Bonneville Salt Flats here, and we are actually blowing at approximately probably 50-mile-an-hour winds here.
Oof.
And it was beautiful because it made this beautiful background of the storm clouds coming in.
Right.
But, you know, I had a bare flash set up, and I had probably 2 20-pound shot bags on it, so 40 pounds. And it was bending the light stand, you know, and I even went down to a smaller light. In fact, this was with a little AD 200, so like a speed light. It's barely off camera right here, and you can notice it doesn't look like it was lit with flash, does it?
No, not at all.
But how did I freeze her hair? Exactly. And I think this was under 200th of a second. So if you could think of like everything moving, I was able to get that frozen motion because, one, I balanced the exposure. So the flash wasn't really adding a lot to the actual composition. It's not lighting her skin. It's basically just freezing the motion.
Cool.
And so sometimes I'll use it just for that. And yeah, is it adding a little bit of fill? Yeah, it is. You know, I have to say it would be. Now, if I go to this next example, you can actually see the shadow that this is casting because I did actually, you know, turn up the light here and give it a little bit more punch. And yeah, this is bare bulb. That's why there's harsh shadows. But if I had turned this flash off and not used natural light, not only would it not have frozen her hair, I would have had kind of some blurry hair and blurry dresses, but it probably would have been more difficult to light her and still have that dark storm clouds in the background. Because if I would have exposed for her, it would have made the sky brighter, right? We've all done that. We have a bright, pure white, blown out sky, but their face looks good. With flash, I can have both. I can have the beautiful sunset, dark, stormy clouds in the background, but still have a properly exposed subject.
Well, and in this case, it also gives you shape. It looks like you were kind of overcast skies, which gives you this, you know, really nice, even flat lighting that can be very, very nice, but it's also very flat. It doesn't really show the contours of the face. It doesn't give you that three-dimensionality to your subject.
Yeah. And these have been edited, so I will say I have done some dodging and burning here. You can see there is an obvious color grade that has been applied to these. You know, taking these from a camera raw format and showing these edited TIFFs, but basically going from start to finish, I mean, the flash saved the shoot. And even then I had to put it away. As I was talking earlier, it got so bad. And of course my trigger got kicked off the camera and shattered all over the salt. Luckily it didn't get the camera. I was so worried it got the camera because the camera was ripped out of the battery grip. So other than the battery grip, which I was able to like actually tap the threads and save it, it would have been more disastrous. But yeah, so just to show you, there's some options there.
Yeah, definitely. I've been starting to get into portraiture a little bit in my off time, and I'm definitely seeing now that I've got kind of a better flash setup and such. Yeah, it really does give you much more options, and you can get nice crisp results without having to go too crazy with your camera settings.
No, like here, I'll show you an example. And this is where I wanted to really demonstrate the difference in, like, this is a model I'm shooting. I put her in open shade. So this was a 100-degree day. Sun's directly overhead. And y'all are going to have assignments and in productions where you're not going to get to choose what time to go. I know, Sam, you've told me there's been times where the event's happening at this time of the day and you were there to capture a photo or shoot some video of it, and you can't always wait for the proper light. And a lot of times just having a little bit of flash can really save that. So if I would have just stuck her in this open shade, and for those that are just listening, imagine a model kind of in a forest, just off of a sidewalk, kind of standing in the open shade, where there's a lot of trees in the background with very little bright light coming through. If I were to turn off the flash on this and expose her so she was looking the same. And I wish I would have done this. I was hoping I would have had a misfire, but I actually didn't, because that's how good the technology has got over the past few years. I rarely get misfires on my flashes anymore. But if I were to expose her face, this background would have been blown out. I wouldn't have had this beautiful, creamy, green, bokeh out, background. But it doesn't look like she's necessarily lit differently, so I really balanced my flash with what's there. And you can see, you can always look at someone's pupils to see what modifiers used. I think it was a 38-inch beauty dish on this, right? So basically an umbrella, a parabolic umbrella, camera right, 2 o'clock, probably less than 3 feet away from her. And that was able to balance. And this is raw, by the way. This has not been edited. This photo is literally, straight out of camera.
Nice.
And I'm hypersyncing too. In fact, hypersyncing means like we're shooting above sync speed, and that's the other challenge when we use strobe, is that we just can't take that shutter speed and crank it up to whatever we want. Remember, the burst of the light in the shutter curtain that literally opens up, or I say I guess unless you're buying the new fancy Sony with the real shutter curtain, the digital shutter curtain has to align at the same time that flash turns on and off and pops that strobe. And so because of that, we have a limitation of usually 2/50th in Nikons, sometimes 200th of a second, that if I go above that, I'll actually see a black bar on my frame. So if any of you have tried flash and all of a sudden you're seeing this black curtain or this black bar, it's because your sync speed, you're above what the actual flash and camera can talk to each other. Well, the cool thing is that we have technology now that lets us get around that. We call it hypersync. I believe that's Pocket Wizard's trademark thing. But anytime we go above 2/50th of a second, or whatever the rated speed is for the camera, we are actually able to do that. So for me to balance that background and not blow that out, I had to crank it up to 800th of a second. And then I was able to turn the flash up as a second exposure, an independent exposure, to balance her out.
Nice.
And without going any deeper, and this is, I could spend hours just on this. When I talk about 2 exposures, I want you to remember 2 things. If there's 2 things you take away when you're trying to learn flash, it's your shutter speed controls your ambient or your practical exposure. Remember, we're not doing video, so we're not locked at 180 degrees anymore. We don't have to be at a 20, you don't have to be at a 48th or a 60th or, an 80th, whatever it might be. My shutter speed controls my ambient light. My aperture controls my flash power. That is so hard to wrap your head around. This used to boggle me. So I could leave the flash the same. I could leave it turned on. I could take a light. I could turn it at 1/64th power, shoot it at her, and start cranking down my shutter speed faster. She would stay the same. The background would change. Now, there is going to be a law of eventually, we call it the inverse square law, right? Where it would start influencing the total global exposure. Everything would start getting dark. But I can control the subject in the background independently. I mean, who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm using continuous lighting, I'm kind of at the whims of, I can turn the power up and down on the light, right? Mm-hmm. But that's about it. With strobe or off-camera flash, I now can independently control the exposure of my subject and the exposure of my background. And I can balance it out with my ISO, right? And of course, I still have the power of the flash where I can turn the flash up and down as well. Because maybe I really want that 2.8, I want that creamy background. I want to kill that background and bokeh it out. I want to be a really shallow depth of field. Cool, I can still control that subject by changing that aperture, but maybe I want to leave that. So now I'll use the flash power to balance that out. Hopefully people's ears aren't bleeding after that. Tyler, what are your thoughts on that? Did I kill anyone there? Are we still alive?
No. I used to work with a lot of photographers that complain all the time about their photo assignments. Now I know for sure they were just whining because you can control foreground and background separately. Then what are you complaining about?
So a lot of it is just you got to get out and do it. That's so true with so many things with this field.
100%.
You just got to get out.
How hard it is
experiment.
To match a person to a bright background with video? I know you do, Sam. It's rhetorical, but
bring in the 12 by 12 fly swatter with a double. you know?
Well,
I've been on
and-
movie sets where they've got like two 5Ks pumping into a window, like through a giant sheet of muslin.
Yeah, we call
For reference, a 5K is bigger than you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean,
Yeah.
photographers walk around with a 5K in their pocket, in their backpack.
Yeah, in
Like-
fact, I think my biggest one's 1,000. It's 1,000. It's a 1,000 watt, right? Light. I mean, that's huge,
Yeah,
and
one
like
kid's
I can
deal, like,
I can fit that. I can fit
head.
that. Like it's the size of like a size 12. It's like as big as your boots, right? Versus if I wanted a 5K continuous light, man, like I'm not plugging that into a wall. That isn't going to run on 20 amps.
no.
No.
You know, I'm
No,
gonna have
you
to
need-
bring.
You have to
I'm
have
gonna
like electricians to make
Yeah.
sure that it can run.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have 3-phase power brought in. We're gonna have to run the big guys. We're gonna have to bring in a generator because remember your basic Edison sockets, your light switches on the wall, or what? And here in the United States, we're 100, 110, 115, 120 volts at 15 amps is the max. Newer places may be rated at 20 amps, but past that, like man, you're melting stuff. But yet I can put something in my backpack, in my go bag, whatever assignment I have, and I can take that with me and pop it out. I'll have enough light to overpower the sun or overpower that environment and light my subject how I want them to be lit. That showcases the objective of the assignment.
Yeah, and the image that you've been sharing really kind of speaks to, like, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to use flash because I don't want the deer in the headlights look. The big key with making flash look natural is to work with the lighting you're already getting. I mean, if if you do something that's completely contrary to the lighting that's already available, then yeah, it's going to look weird. Or if you just leave the flash on camera, it's going to look weird because it looks like an on-camera flash.
And that's the other thing I tell you. If you're getting started with flash, this isn't the paparazzi days where you stick it on the hot shoe and go and like laser beam them. The whole thing is you have to get it off axis that the camera's on, meaning it can't be on the same axis as your lens that you're pointing at your subject. So I know even people like they'll even hold it off to the side. Like a lot of you have access to Nikon. You know, a lot of your Nikon flashes have a built-in system where you can wirelessly trigger that flash. I've had people where they will hold their camera and then they have their flash up to the side, and just by moving that off axis, that's going to create a totally different environment. And so it's very rare that I'll ever shoot on axis of the camera, just moving it off. In these examples I'm showing you, as I said, the light is frame right at a 2 o'clock position, shooting at a downward 45-degree angle, kind of your classic portrait Rembrandt type lighting. And you can see I'm actually even overpowering the sun here, because if you notice the sun's actually coming through the trees here, and I actually have a couple hot spots on her that I'm going to have to either edit out or just let them be part of the frame, depending. This is more editorial, so I'll probably let them be. But you can see I'm actually overpowering the sun. And if I were to hold my mouse over this, my histogram is only reading between 70 and 90%. So there's data there. I didn't blow out the picture.
Nice.
So yeah, a lot of different things there you can choose. So here's an example of the same thing. In fact, this was one I probably won't use, raw out of camera, a little bit underexposed, but you can see the modifier in the frame here. And again, this is like a 40-inch umbrella or beauty dish frame left, shooting down on the model, and literally lighting her, freezing her in motion. And again, now I have the full ability to where I got this a nice dark green while she's still exposed. And the subject in this one's very pale, right? Talk about a contrast issue.
Yeah.
This would be so, if I had continuous lighting here, this would have been horrible to try to grade out. Like I probably would have been trying to adjust the power of the continuous light, constantly trying to get it just right. And not only that, but I'm outside in open shade, so that means the clouds are coming in and out, so my exposure is changing every 10 minutes. All of you been out there, you know what happens. You know, you get everything set up and all of a sudden a cloud comes in and it changes your whole setup, right?
Yeah.
This allows me to change very quickly versus if I had continuous lights, I'm running all over the place trying to change them.
Well, and the flash is going to become arguably more useful with some of the new cameras coming out. Stacked sensors or now partially stacked sensors are becoming more of a thing. And so sync speeds are becoming faster and faster. For those who don't, most traditional cameras, whether it's doing it digitally or with a physical curtain, you've got basically one door opens for the flash, the other one closes behind it. That can be happening electronically, that can be happening physically. But basically it scans kind of top to bottom. Well, at a certain point, that second door starts to close before the first door is fully open. And that
I got an example. Sam.
Oh, you got an example.
So I didn't have hypersyncing enabled, and this is part of that same shoot. Let me see if I have a couple where I have a shutter curtain actually in frame. In fact, I already culled these out. I'm going to show you some bad photos, guys, so you can have a nice laugh. But if you take a look at this frame that I'm showing you right now.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the difference. I got this black band going across her head.
Yeah, it almost looks like she's under like an overhang or something like that, but it's actually the flash. Yeah.
And that is the curtain, the actual curtain of that. So that means with sync speed, I can only go so fast with my shutter speed to where the light pops open and does its boop, its strobe. It has to time it perfectly with the shutter speed. Mm-hmm. But what's cool with technology, there's hypersyncing that lets me go above that. And I was probably hypersynced on this photo, but the problem is I probably hadn't enabled it on the actual metadata. And let me look and see what this says. Yeah, I was at 1/250th of a second. And for some reason, my Z8 only likes 200th of a second. Kind of a complaint of mine. The 850s, those of you on 850s or 810s or 800s, I've always been able to shoot 1/250th without hypersyncing. For some reason, these new mirrorless ones, I haven't got a hands on a Z6 II yet. I know some of those are going to be available. I'm curious to what you guys find out if you're able to actually sync at 2/50th or if you have to drop it down.
Yeah, we're supposed to get a couple of Z8s where I work, but I believe there's different modes. So some of these new stacked sensor cameras, I forget if it's there's different shutter modes, if I remember right, and some of them will actually give you even higher sync speeds. And in fact, they're starting to bring out global shutter cameras where there is no delay between the top and the bottom of the frame, so you can sync at any speed. So of course, the downside of hypersync is it's basically letting out a quick burst of flashes so that it kind of drags out the flash a little bit. But the downside of that is you lose power. Not as much as, you gotta
crank it up, right?
Yeah, not as much as a continuous light or something like that. But you do definitely lose power with doing that. But some of these new cameras, if you can sync at crazy high speeds, whether there are, I want to say some of the like Fuji X100 series cameras have leaf shutters, or the new Sony Alpha 9 III has a global shutter.
You're sacrificing megapixels, all right? I mean, they're not quite.
Well, yeah. Global shutter, the A9 III, it's a 24 megapixel camera, but I mean, probably not a camera that we're going to see for federal use a whole lot. But it's on the horizon. It's something where we're starting to get the ability to have higher and higher sync speeds on a lot of these cameras, and that's only going to make flash more useful. I tend to hear a lot of people say, I like continuous light because I can see the light, I can predict it a little bit more, or these new cameras, you don't even need to light. They're so sensitive that you can just light, use whatever the available lighting is. And the truth is, these new sensors are actually making lighting more useful, because now you don't have to kick out as much power because the sensors are more sensitive. But you're getting higher sync speeds now after a few years of getting slower and slower sync speeds, where flash is more effective because you can sync at a higher speed.
Yeah, and like I said, hypersyncing is basically it's actually thwarting. It's the software thwarting the hardware of the camera, right? It's trying to cheat the system where the camera's locked to maybe a 200th or 250th at the most before you see that infamous black bar. It's actually cheating the system, as Sam said. It's actually bursting a bunch of flash over a longer duration to try to keep that curtain from showing up or having that shadow cast. So, but again, the problem is if I'm out in the midday sun and maybe I'm hypersyncing, and for me to get that ambient exposure down, maybe I'm at 1/8,000th of a second, right? I'm kind of maxing out what the camera can do. I have that light or that speed light or flash probably cranked up to 100% or a 1-to-1 power ratio. And the sacrifice of that is obviously I'm not going to get as many. I'm going to have to use more battery and more power. And number two, we call it recycle time. And that's another caveat of flash, is that every time the flash goes off, it has to recycle, recharge, or regenerate that power so it can go again. It's that capacitor. And you hear the old flashes, that beep, kind of sounds like the proton pack charging up in Ghostbusters. That's basically a capacitor is what they're using, that's storing all that energy so it can throw that burst of light in a very quick process. So if I'm shooting in midday sun, even with like a 600 watt like strobe, I'm going through a couple batteries, and I can't just go click, 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 click. I just can't spray and pray my exposures. So if I'm in a journalistic setting, I'm shooting a graduation, I'm shooting a speaker, I may have to really think about what I'm doing if I'm in the outdoors trying to do that, because I might click 2 times in a second, but my first exposure will have a flash. My second frame exposure won't have anything shown. It'll just be black because the flash hadn't recycled and recharged enough to fire again. So that's something you'll run into all the time as well, especially when you're on assignment. So something to think about.
Yeah, and that can be kind of a pro on the side of continuous lights, but there are also things that you can do to kind of manage your flash sync speed, recycle time. Because it's going to take a while to recycle full power. But if you're able to adjust your settings where you're only at a quarter power or, 1/32 power or even lower than that, I've found that you can actually fire off pretty quickly, especially with more professional flashes.
Yeah, the bigger the flash and the more power you have, the faster the recycling time. And the better you can do. And again, there's other options I can do as well. Like, as you said, I can use the other part of my exposure triangle to where maybe I can tweak with my ISO, or can I tweak my aperture a little bit to maybe cheat that shutter to a lower shutter speed, meaning I have to have less light to pump at the person. So, and I think, Tyler, you brought it up earlier. You have to go practice this.
Absolutely.
And the cool thing is, you don't have to go get your cables, your stingers, go check out a bunch of equipment, from your person there and on your team to go do this. You just need a camera, a light, and an umbrella. That's what's cool about this. You don't have to go invest like your time off or a full day to go do this. You can grab someone that's in your squadron, someone that's on your team for the shoot off, and you can just go mess with this. And here's another pro I'm going to tell you guys, and for being a hybrid shooter like both of you, I'm always going to need still photography even if I'm doing video. What about my press kit? What about my marketing? What about behind the scenes? Like, that's stuff I always have to think about when I'm building or producing something. I have to think about, okay, what I'm going to do. I have to have some stills to go with it.
Yeah,
So,
a lot of it comes down to the right tool for the right job. I mean,
bingo.
and even if you've got a full video lighting setup, if you throw a flash or two in your kit so that when you do need to switch out to full photo, you can swap out for a strobe of some kind. And the coolest part about being a creator today is that a lot of our lights are now using the same modifiers. We don't have to have different modifiers for our video lights, different modifiers for our photo lights. A lot of lights these days use Bowens mount. And so you can have a softbox and you just swap out the flash. Like, when I did those 2 test shots doing self-portraits, I had the same stand, the same softbox, same everything. I just swapped out the head from a continuous light to a flash. And now I've got the power of a flash for the same exact shot. So it's really cool where we're at these days with more flexibility. So really what I'm trying to get at with all of this is experiment. use different tools. Don't think that just because, continuous light is easier, that it's the best. I mean, most times when things are easier, they're not the best. But in this case, it's great for certain things, but flash can be really great for others. Last thing I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is just, background lights. Background lights can be really handy to just spice up a shot. In the lighting training that I give, I often show this slide, and just to kind of show how much depth a background light can give. And this was a situation where the flash actually didn't fire. I was shooting too quickly, running full power, and it just didn't recycle in time. But it kind of illustrates just how different of a photo you can get with background light versus no background light. So flashes can be really cool, especially if you've got a radio trigger and can put a flash way off in the distance and be able to create a light like that. But at the same time, LEDs have become really cool for this as well, because now you've got color changing modes and you don't have to go out there and gel and try different gels and not quite get the color that you're looking for. Now you can just sit on an app and dial in the exact color that you want, and no fuss, no muss.
My challenge is just remember your LEDs are going to have a really huge fall off really quickly. With a strobe, I can put it 30 feet away and still have it expose them. With an LED, that's been my biggest challenge that I've had as I've moved into more continuous lighting. And I'm like you, Sam, I've kind of gone into the gel. In fact, this year is what I call my year of color, where I'm shooting a lot of like colors and gels. And in the past, I had to like if I wanted to change a flash and I needed to balance it, I'd have to put a CTB or a CTO, the blue or the orange,
color
to balance it.
Color temp blue.
Yeah, color temp blue, right? Basically, tungsten orange or continuous temp blue, right? And what's cool is with these continuous lights, like I can just turn it to whatever color I want, and it's right there for me. But the problem is I have to get it super close to them. And so that's been a little bit of a challenge. And the other part is if I'm trying to add color or gel a flash, any white light that leaks or contaminates that, you're going to lose the color. And so it was always difficult to try to put a big old gel, and I'm all gaff taping it to the strobe, and I'm trying to put an umbrella through it or whatever. I did that for a couple of years, and that's kind of why I abandoned color gel photography and creative lighting, because it really didn't work. So on that point, continuous for the win, hands down, as long as I'm in an area where I can have it close to them and have it out of the frame. So maybe some longer lenses and stuff to compress the background.
Well, and even trying to match color between 2 or 3 different lights using gels is so incredibly difficult, versus the green wash that I've got behind me right now is actually 3 different lights. It's 3 different lights. I've got a PT1C. These are 2 Amaran lights, 1 aperture, an Amaran PT1C, a T4C, that's the 4-foot bar behind me, and then a little aperture MT Pro. And because I can dial in the color, and because they're all calibrated, it's one continuous wash of color that is the exact same temperature as same.
And they all have apps. That's what I love about them. And not only that, but to get techy, they all have a high CRI. And so, they're going, whatever color you're seeing, the camera's going to be able to pick up and get. Right. And with strobes, you try to color a strobe, the CRI is really just not going to be there. I mean, I've had times where I gel something really blue on a strobe. It looks blue on the modeling light. I take a picture, and I look on my LCD screen, or I get back, and regardless of what color space I'm shooting in, it just doesn't match the same as the continuous light.
And just to chime in on background lights and side lighting, all that good stuff for video, because you showed a photo example. If your goal is to separate your subject from the background and make them prominent, background lights are great. Even this is just my window making my wall bluer because I've warmed up the light up here, just helps me separate from the background. It makes it look like it's not just a white whatever that's behind me. So
yeah. And we're just not Sam, Tyler. I have a window next to me, and I was too lazy
Sam's
to
a
black
nerd.
it out.
He's like the king of nerds.
And so I thought
I was a nerd, and then I met Sam. Now I feel bad.
And Sam actually helped me kind of pick. He let me play with some tube lights, and these are my new best friends, and I've used these. I'm using these for video and photo, and I wish I was sponsored by these guys. But just like the rest of us here, we're not sponsored, and so there's no buy-in. But these
I may be a shill for Aperture, but I'm not sponsored by Aperture.
Dude, these have a Pavo tube.
Yeah, these Pavo tubes by Nanlite, and these are the new ones. The new ones are actually wireless. What do you call them?
CRMX.
Yeah, they're wireless CRMX, so I don't even have to cable them. And the battery on these is great. The app on it is great, whether you're on Android or Apple or running them from like a other mobile device like a tablet. I've been using
they have
these.
All kinds of mounts to like put them in all kinds of different situations on light stands. Yeah,
this has like 5
I have a mount
that's 20 holes.
All 4. So all 4 of them, and then you use the cable to sync them up so that it's like one big soft plate.
And then the other thing, these actually, unlike a lot of your bicolor lights that either do like daylight, your 5600 Kelvin, or your indoor incandescent, your 3200, these actually go up to 12,000 Kelvin. So really cool when I'm like in a like cloudy situation or in a, it's getting past 5600K and I want to warm them up. I can do that. And then again, the CRI on these is like over 97 or 98%. So I mean, what I see is what I'm going to get. And I've tested this in sRGB, Adobe 98, P3, and ProPhoto. So I've tested in multiple color spaces as well as log footage and raw footage for video, and these have all like come out really well. And I'm not just saying it's Pavo tubes. I mean, even the Apertures do this. So that's something I love. If you're doing anything with bright colors, like I think continuous wins every time, Sam. I found that was kind of a beat down for me when it came down to that. I don't think I'll ever put like gels on top of a strobe again, to be honest with you.
In the interest of not being sponsored by Nanlite, I also love Nanlite's all their lights. But Aperture makes great tubes. There's another company that makes great tubes that are really expensive. I don't remember who they are.
There's a bunch.
I realized I couldn't afford them.
There's the the Titan tubes. There's also Quasar Science. They're kind of the original tubes.
Yeah, Quasar Science. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different companies, and honestly, like I'm kind of at a point where I love using tubes as my background lights, and then my key is going to be either, if I'm shooting video, it's going to be usually some sort of COB point source light through a softbox or whatever, or a Fresnel or whatever modifier I need. But then, if it's photo, I'll switch it over to strobes, flashes.
And what I love about that, you talked about being on a production and switching out stuff. I may not even have, maybe I'm not in a position for time and production sake to switch stuff out. If I have all my continuous light set up for the video setup, I can have my strobe separate and have them step out of the room or step over to like a splinter set or a splinter unit and go shoot that still photography while they're doing that. Mm-hmm. And so that's a time where I've been able to maximize my time when my producer director's like, we got to get this stuff done now. Like, we got to be wrapped by 5 o'clock tonight. And I'm like, yeah, I have everything set up for video. Then I got to swap everything out. It's like, no, I can just create a little second setup outside in a different area if I have the space. And I can be running that at the same time, almost as a B unit or a second unit or a splinter unit. So that's been really cool as well.
So we're over the hour mark as far as our recording anyway. We'll see if it's an hour for the podcast itself. So I think it's about time to wrap this up.
We could go on for hours, but another time in the same channel, right?
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll have you back, Ben, to talk about other photographic type things. I know you and I can. I mean, that's why it works so well when we go out doing astrophotography together, because we will literally spend the entire night just talking about different topics.
Yeah, I think the takeaways are today, to summarize it from my perspective, is one, flash photography is not something to be scared about. It's not something that's going to take a huge investment. If you're already used to doing video or continuous lighting, it's not going to be a huge step for you. Number two, you don't need to have a lot of equipment to do it. And number three, it is an amazing tool to add to your toolbox on top of your continuous light source. And it will add value to your production. It'll add value to your brand. And whatever you're photographing is going to provide you better results in certain situations. And lastly, I'm curious, Sam, to those that listen to this or watch this, we'd love to hear your comments. And if you have follow-up questions or you'd like to hear something else or learn a little bit more, like, I know we'd always be interested in hearing that. So Sam and Tyler, I appreciate you having me on. And if they made it this far, like, hey, thanks for staying awake and going through the geekology of off-camera flash.
Yeah, and Tyler, I know you weren't talking a whole lot through this particular episode since you don't do as much flash photography as we do. Did you learn any new tips, tools, tricks? Yeah.
Absolutely. The whole aperture controls foreground and shutter controls background thing, and I think I got that right. Not 100% sure, but
yeah, aperture and ISO control your flash for the most part, and your shutter speed controls just your background,
your practical,
your ambient light.
And what I always say,
it's new for me.
And the best thing to do, and this is the last tip I'll give because we're over on time, shoot your ambient exposure and then turn on the flash and start, you add a light one at a time and take a picture. And just don't put everything in and try to do it all at once.
For sure.
And what I always say, if you want something more contrasty, like expose your background, maybe a stop or two under, and then add that flash as your key light for the subject, and then you can start balancing from there. And if you're using more than one flash, maybe you have a key light, a hair light, or even your continuous lights, adding that background, add them one at a time, and you can use additive or subtractive lighting techniques to try to see what you're getting out of each one. Just don't turn everything on and try smorgasbording it. You'll just get upset.
Right. It's the same thing with video and continuous lighting. I turn off all my lights and I light the background, and then I turn off that and turn the key on, and then we look at them all together, and it's really the same, just different.
Yeah, it's basically the same. You're doing two sets of lighting separate from each other, and merging them together in the photo. But yeah,
I wish video could do that. I wish I could just be like, turn the sun down, please.
Yeah, I wish I had an M40 that fit in my backpack. That I have that for photo.
That's what I love with speed lights. I can turn down the sun.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I
wild.
do. I can make noon look night to dark. I don't have to go do some color grade.
Yeah.
Like I can turn off the sun using a flash, given I have the power and the right modifier.
Yep. Especially
same thing. I can turn a white seamless background black. In fact, people ask me, what's your favorite color of background? I say, give me a white background because I can make it any color I want.
See, I like gray for that reason. Gray is a little bit easier to darken. And you can always brighten it with exposure. But yeah, really the bottom line with all this is right tool for the right job. I mean, that's what a lot of this comes down to. These are all just tools in our tool bag. No one thing is going to be the best in all situations. Each one has strengths and weaknesses. If you know what they are, you can leverage them. That's what it comes down to, right? I mean,
invest the time to learn it.
Yeah. So
you don't learn how to use a hammer by using a screwdriver.
Yeah.
I think last thing we'll say is if you haven't registered for the DC Video Shoot Off in August, go to dcvideoshootoff.org and do that so we can
please
see your faces and learn video and have a good time.
And we can teach you all sorts of cool stuff. It is the video shoot off, but I mean, a lot of us are photographers as well.
You don't have to be good at video to come to the shoot off. In fact, we kind of prefer you're not.
Right.
So
damn know-it-alls. I'm talking about myself, of course. And I'll be there as well. And I always tell people the easy part is getting me to start talking about photo and video stuff. The hard part is getting me to shut up. I'm sure both Tyler and Ben can attest. But
don't start a conversation with me if you're like about video stuff, if you're on your way out the door.
No. But in any case, we'd love to see folks out for the shoot off. Hopefully you all found this particular episode interesting and learned a couple of things and maybe want to try a few things. So we should have 2 more episodes before the DC video shoot off. We're hoping to talk to some of our sponsors as well as get some of the previous year's winners to talk about what went into their projects. We don't know for sure if we'll have those, but that's what we're trying for. But until then, take these lighting tips, flash, continuous lighting, make epic stuff, shoot cool things, make incredible imagery, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Peace out.